The fact is, I think we have a perfect storm going on in the platinum industry at the moment. You've got escalating costs. You've got a platinum price, which is basically where it was 2 years ago. And you have an oversupply situation. Now, in that situation, the things you have to do, one of the things one needs to do is to cut costs. And you need to look at where those cuts have to happen most effectively. The other thing I think to look at, maybe that's when we come to the solutions, is how government could come best to the party. I do have some ideas around that. Maybe we could talk about that as well.
No, we certainly will in a minute. But how did we come to where we are, firstly?
Well, I mean, there are two reasons for that. I mean, obviously, the platinum price is an international price. In that sense, South Africa's a price taker. It's not a price maker. Secondly, energy costs have doubled over the last 2 years, and labor costs are very high. I mean, there's something like 50% of the production costs. So, you've got all those factors happening together, and then the other thing is the industry went through quite extensive expansion over the last number of years. So you've got too much capacity, you've got a static price, you've got escalating costs. So all of those things are really a recipe for a problem.
Because I think what confuses a lot of us is we're the biggest producers in platinum, and we should have a competitive advantage in this area.
Yes, but well, I suppose we do. I mean, we have 80% of the world's platinum production comes out of South Africa. But I mean, platinum can, as I understand it, be substituted by palladium, which is produced by countries such as Russia. Zimbabwe is also a platinum producer. But I mean, clearly the fact that we have 80% of the world's supply does give us an advantage. But I mean, there are serious, local endogenous problems with the industry which need to be fixed.
Let me bring in Zwelicha Tanzi. Why are we in this position as far as NUM is concerned?
Xolani, there are a number of issues that are contributing to the situation. First is a Eurozone crisis. And secondly, there are also a number of factors that Peter Leone have indicated, like one, we are the price taker. We don't determine price for the platinum. And secondly, the electricity is also part of the contribution. Yeah.
Anything to add for your part, Mr. McMaster?
Much has been mentioned by Peter and Ecliffe. I think the productivity issue is certainly in front of everyone's minds, to try and make the mines more productive. And there you also have issues around labour stability. You've got other issues in terms of the recent state intervention in mining sector report, the SIMS report, as referred to, that does not create confidence with investors in terms of the state's role going forward in terms of the mining sector. So that was just some of the other points that was raised by various companies in the week.
I know that there was a meeting on Monday, but I would like you to talk to a little bit. One of the issues that you've raised, you talk about labour stability.
Yes, just in broad terms. I mean, we have seen what has happened in the specifically the platinum industry over the last 2 months. We've had numerous strikes at the likes of Impala, etc. And that has a lot to do with new unions that want to enter the fore, and is not part of the established unions such as the likes of the NUM and Solidarity. And that has also created a huge amount of problems in terms of lots of revenue at some of the companies. I mean, you have Impala Platinum that declared about a 2.6 billion rand loss in profits due to that industrial action. So it is a concern when you have these less mature unions with more militant tactics, if you could call it that, that tries and enter the fore, whereas you have the more responsible unions that try and create that sustainability in the sector.
Mr. Nancy, surely that should worry unions when workers are seen to have created or at least contributed to this kind of instability.
What we want to clarify, Xolani, is that we mustn't confuse militancy with violence. we are more worried about violence, not about militants. We are very worried, and we think that the companies must take responsibility for what is happening at Impala. More worrying so is that when workers are forced to join the union and are forced not to go to work, as NUMM, we will never do that.
All right.
And we
but
don't
you
do
see,
it.
I think the implication, or at least we get a sense that this is simply about the Implat strike. And other people are saying, well, it's been going on for quite a while. There's been instability around labor relations in this sector for a while. What do you say to that, Mr. Tanzi?
The instability you are talking about must not be confused with the protected strikes, which are normally in the industry.
Maybe it's that normality. The fact that strikes are normal is abnormal, but it's by itself.
No, let's correct this. We have never had a sector strike in the platinum, not at all. You would have the sporadic strike, but protected strikes, and at the same time, you are able to contain the situation. So, to me, that is not an issue. But the worrying factor is the new development of violence. That is worrying to everybody.
Mr. Leon, the labor relations issue?
Yeah, I certainly think it is a problem, and obviously, I mean, if people have been talking about the Implat strike, but I think it is an issue in the industry. I mean, the Impala situation obviously had a huge impact on South Africa's GDP, and indeed on mining production in the first half of this year. And certainly that makes a difficult situation even worse. And labour costs, something we haven't really talked about, are an issue in the industry. So, I mean, I think if we're talking about how we can try and address these problems, one of the ways one would need to look at that is how one can have some sort of pact which would, keep the cost of labour at a reasonable level. So,
all right. I'm going to ask the unions.
I'm going
to ask the unions what they think about that. But let me ask you about the issue of production and implants in particular, Mr. Leon, because it's quite ironic. There was no production for about 3, 4, 5 weeks.
Yeah, I think it was 6 actually.
Yeah, something like 6 weeks, and therefore one would have imagined there would be problems of supply, but we're still talking about oversupply.
Yeah, no, we are. But, I mean, the fact is that where it had the knock-on effect is that it affected was it such a major producer, it affected the platinum production in the industry, and affected mining production as a whole, and then had an effect on South Africa's, on the contribution of mining to GDP.
But how did that happen? It affected supply, right?
Yes.
But why then are we still talking now about oversupply as being one of the reasons why the platinum sector in general is in trouble?
Well, that's the reason that's been put up by the analysts, but clearly Impala is a major player in the industry, and so obviously that had an impact on the industry in general.
Dr. Gavin is a political economist at the University of Cape Town.
Hi there, it's Dr. Gavin Capps. I'm a research fellow at the University of Cape Town. I'm a political economist, and I work in the platinum industry.
Thank you very much for your call. Yeah, what are your thoughts?
Okay, well, thanks for giving me the opportunity, Clarny. Actually, I think the point that you just read out is quite a good one about the idea of a crisis being whipped up before the policy conference, and I think in a kind of way, Mr. Leon, who's now left the studio, made the point quite well. Not as he intended to, though. There are 3 points I would like to make.
Yeah.
The first is what we're not looking at here is actually the longer-term view. And the longer-term view of most platinum analysts, including within the industry itself, is actually that the future of the industry is pretty bright. Oh. Because what they're looking at is the continuity of the Asian boom, and that the Asian boom weathered the storm of the 2008 financial crisis. There's a belief, perhaps over-optimistic, but there is a belief that it's going to weather the current European crisis. Mm-hmm. And if that is the case, then the platinum market is going to continue to grow because the Asian car market will grow. Platinum is used in about 20% of consumer durables, and of course the white metal jewellery market is going to continue to grow as well. Yeah. So that's the long-term picture, and actually it's been on an upward curve since the mid-1990s. Rather, what we're looking at perhaps is a short-term blip, which is just connected to the peculiarities of the platinum market in Europe. And the peculiarity there is that platinum, more platinum than palladium, is used in the catalytic converters, which are used in diesel engines. Diesel engines are a much higher percentage of the European car market. That's where the problem is. But we still shouldn't forget that South Africa accounts for 30% of world's palladium production as well. The two metals are actually mined side by side, so it's doing pretty well out of palladium demand too. So that's part of the picture on the on the demand side. On the supply side, what isn't being talked about, and I disagree actually with what's been said in the studio, is I'm not so sure that South Africa is a price taker as far as the world platinum market is concerned, precisely because South Africa does account for 80% of world production. And indeed, that 80% of world production is dominated by a handful of very, very large companies. The largest of those, Anglo Platinum, accounts for a massive 40% of world platinum production. We can think of few other industries in the world where you have a single corporation accounting for that much of global market share. And the long-term strategy of Anglo Platinum and its predecessors, going back to the apartheid era and actually to the beginnings of the industry in the 1920s, has been to control the rate of global supply in order to manipulate world price and in order to ride out the fluctuations in the commodity, which is what essentially we have at the moment, a short-term, potentially longer-term fluctuation. So when it's Anglo Platinum's partners, in this case Aquarius, who have started talking about cutting back, Anglo Platinum, as we know, is reviewing its operations. I wouldn't be surprised if it does start holding back. The reason being is that it's sat on the highest value platinum reserves in the country, and it wants to ensure that it makes maximum profits for those. I expect it's going to hold back on supply. It's going to force the world price up again. When it becomes more profitable, it's going to start pumping the stuff out again.
So in essence, you're saying this is part of manipulating prices?
I think that's a very, very important part of the picture which isn't being spoken about here. And the platinum industry is uniquely positioned to do that because of its monopoly of the actual resource in South Africa and the handful of companies which control it.